الله بالخير. بيتر أوبون الصحفي البريطاني كان واحدا منهم، كاتب عمود في التلغراف، مساهم في السبكتيتر، كان يعرف أين دفنت الجثث لأنه ساعد في حفر بعض القبور، ثم استقال عام 2015. اتهم صحيفته بقمع القضايا وطمسها لحماية المعلنين والحفاظ عليهم. النخبة الإعلامية اقتصت منه. الآن بيتر كتب الكتاب الذي يرفضون مراجعته ويتظاهرون بأنه غير موجود. متواطئ، كيف تسهم بريطانيا في تدمير غزة؟ هو ليس مجرد كتاب آخر عن غزة، يعتبر تحدياً للسردية الرسمية البريطانية من خلال تحليل استقصائي. إنه مذكرة قانونية لمحاكمة المسؤولين عن الإبادة الجماعية. بيتر أوبون لا يكتفي بتوثيق الجرائم، بل يكشف أسماء المجرمين مدعومة بالأدلة وبالأطر القانونية وبأقوالهم التي استخدمت ضدهم. لكن من هم؟ وما هي الأدلة؟ ولماذا؟ وما العواقب؟ ومن يحاسب؟ بيتر أوبون يجزم بأن بريطانيا هي ثالث المسؤولين عن الإبادة الجماعية في غزة بعد إسرائيل والولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، ليس مجازياً بل قانونياً. كتاب متواطئ هو مستند قانوني. نرحب بكم ونرى ونسمع أكثر مع بيتر أوبون الصحفي البريطاني المتخصص في الشؤون الدولية والغرب آسيوية في البعد الأقرب. هذه الميادين وأنا زينب صفار، خليكم ويانا. Salam and welcome to Al Mayadeen. This is Zainab Al Safa for the Proximate Aspect and my dear guest, Peter Oborne, British journalist and author. Peter, it's amazing to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well indeed, thank you, although my heart is with the suffering people of Gaza and the Lebanon and Sudan and other places.
Sure. Well, actually, in this context, Peter, you have written a very important book, Complicit, How Our Government Supports Israel's Genocide in Gaza. It is, of course, your most recent, ballistic and controversial work. Congratulations, Peter. Now, let's dissect it in absolute depth. What are the bottom lines of Complicit? Why do you believe unequivocally that the British government is red-handed in the Gaza genocide?
What I actually say is that the British government is complicit in the destruction, is the term I use, the destruction of Gaza. And I'll leave it to the International Court of Justice to make the final decision on that. But there are a number of ways in which the British government, I think quite wrongly, has been complicit in the destruction of Gaza. One of them is by continuing to sell arms to the Israelis. One is by giving diplomatic support to the Israelis. I also feel that the British media has not been fair and accurate in its.
So they are complicit in the destruction, but not in the genocide?
It is. I'm saying it is. The title of the book is Complicit in the Destruction. As I explained to you,
True.
I think we have to leave it. There are very important, whatever one's private views are, and there's no question that the majority of expert opinion across the world, including in Israel, is that there is a genocide, but it is ultimately up to the most important court in the world, the highest court in the world, the International Court of Justice, to make a ruling on that.
True. Right. Now, Peter, you prove Gaza complicity flows from Atlanticism, the same logic that drove Iraq. If Palestinian oppression is the inevitable output of Anglo-American empire, not a policy failure, can Palestine be freed without dismantling the entire Atlantic structure first, or are you just treating the symptoms, not the disease?
I think this is a central part of my argument. That one of the problems the world faces at the moment is that the United States of America has become a rogue state, and it doesn't bind itself by the normal rules of international law. It's not a member of the International Criminal Court, which is there to prosecute war criminals. Not only that, but under Donald Trump, it's actually sanctioning the International Criminal Court. It's sanctioning the UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. And this is a terrible thing if you believe in international law, in the great institutions which were created after World War II in order to create a world which is fair and decent for everybody to live in.
You talk about how the British government is complicit in the destruction of Gaza. What evidence do you have for that, Peter? What evidence do you display in your book?
Oh,
I don't want you to break the surprise of the book and all the info that you try to reflect, but what evidence do you base that on?
Well, there are so many different ways. There is no question that terrible destruction has been meted on Gaza. Now, if you look at the way the British government reacted, to begin with, the British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, said he would give unequivocal support to Israel, to Netanyahu's Israel. Then you had the future Prime Minister, Mr. Keir Starmer, saying, that it was okay to have collective punishment at a time when Israel was withholding fuel and humanitarian urgent necessities. Then you had the British government suspended aid or paused funding for the UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which is the major agency bringing humanitarian aid. Then we have the attempt by the previous administration in Britain, not the current one, to sort of sabotage or interfere with the workings of the International Criminal Court. You go on and on. And also, I feel with the current, the Starmer government, they've not complained. When the Albanese was sanctioned and when the International Criminal Court was sanctioned, I would have hoped that a British Prime Minister would stand up for international law, but he hasn't done that. He's just let Trump go his merry way and target international institutions.
Sure. You were actually, Peter, you were inside the establishment for decades. You know how it works because you were part of how it worked. You yourself were complicit, so to say. Now you've written what amounts to a legal brief for prosecuting the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary and the Defense Secretary, perhaps in the previous administration. I don't know if the current one is exonerated, for the destruction of Gaza. What next? What's going to happen? Who prosecutes the prosecutors when genocide lawyers enable genocide? Isn't legal accountability just a joke?
I'm going to reject your suggestion as I was complicit in the oppression of the Palestinian people. I think that for many years now, I have done my best to expose the oppression of Palestinians.
You
not
were
just in
part of
Gaza.
the establishment before. That's what I meant, Peter.
Yes,
Not
I know. I
complicit
was.
in
And it
Gaza.
doesn't mean one of the interesting things, though, is that if you look at the something has changed in the British establishment.
Mm-hmm.
Maggie Thatcher, the former British Prime Minister, she when after Sabra and Shatila happened, she was furious. She got on the phone to Begin and said what she thought about illegal actions, terrible actions carried out by the Israeli or state Israel's collusion in Sabra and Shatila, and also when Israel hit a nuclear reactor or a half-built nuclear reactor in Iraq. She called the action barbaric. She understood the importance of even though she was a supporter of Israel, she understood you had to criticize Israel very fiercely, including suspending arms sales and all these other things. If they broke the laws of the international law, and that is what, unfortunately, the current British generation of leaders seem to have forgotten. Now, and that brings me to my answer to your question.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is no question, there is no doubt that under British law, the International Criminal Court Act, that British ministers or others, not just ministers, who enable genocide
Mm-hmm.
or who enable war crimes are subject themselves to being prosecuted under British law.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it is determined by the International Court of Justice that a genocide has taken place, and
Right.
it looks very likely that will be the outcome. I've been following the legal arguments.
Right.
Then there will be a prima facie case for the prosecution of quite a number of senior British and international figures.
Do you think they would ever be prosecuted, Peter, based on what you divulge in your book, for example?
Yeah, what I feel is that the British state, it has to be a decision made by the Attorney General, who's a senior minister in the British government, and maybe he wouldn't be allowed to do that by the Prime Minister, who maybe the Prime Minister would sack him if he wanted to do it. But I think that something has changed as a result of Gaza. I think there's a much more heightened political consciousness across the world. And so I think you may find that if Western countries like Britain and the United States, which have represented themselves as being decent countries of high standards, aren't prepared to enforce international law and are actually breaking international law, you may find there are other countries which come together to do the job for them.
Right. For decades, Peter, it was quote-unquote communist, then terrorist sympathizer. Now it's anti-Semite. Different labels were used for the same purpose, to shut people up. You weren't some fringe radical. You were the chief commentator at The Telegraph for years. Then you write this book, or a book on genocide, on the destruction of Gaza, and suddenly you're radioactive and the mainstream pretends you don't exist. They don't touch your book. They don't review it. Doesn't your own career arc prove that the system kicks out anyone who tells the truth?
It is true what you say, that there has been no mainstream review of my book at all in Britain. And it was published about 6 weeks ago. There have been good reviews in alternative outlets, including Declassified, Jacobin, I believe, is going to review it, and so on. But you are right that I think that there is a problem about public discourse, not just in Britain, but across the West. And where you can't, I don't expect people to agree with me necessarily, but I think they should engage with the powerful arguments which I have made in this book. And this refusal even to engage with them suggests that there is a kind of, that we
Pressure.
used to be a place, Britain was, and will, and I'm determined we should return to that, where there was fair public argument, that you could tell the truth, or your version, what you believe to be the truth. And some people would say, yes, that's true. Others might say, no, it's not. But you could avoid
Exactly.
these things.
Allow
Yeah.
me to ask you here, Peter. You talk about lobby pressure, but then you say the British establishment would back Israel anyway. Those are two different explanations. So which one really drives a policy, the lobby or Britain's own imperial interests? Because if it's the lobby, exposing this might change the game. If it's the empire, then the lobby is just theatre. Which story do you want people to believe? Briefly, if I may.
Yes, well, I think the big argument, the biggest factor is the United States. The calculation is that Britain depends, it must do whatever the United States wants. Personally, I'm afraid this is taking us down into a very dark place in Gaza and elsewhere. It is also true that there is a powerful pro-Israel lobby active in Britain, as there is in the United States and in other countries. But it's quite hard, and I set out in my book how it works. I set out the pressure points and the organizations within that, but I allow people to reach conclusions. But it's quite hard because, if Israel wants, Britain to bomb Iran, for instance, or to support, that's one thing. But if it wants Israel to bomb the United States, it probably wouldn't work. There are big limits to the power of the lobby, and it's quite hard to assess exactly how powerful it is.
True. As an expert, Peter, on West Asian affairs, is the Saudi-Israel normalization off the table currently, and was MBS-US visit a defeat for Israel, as some might argue?
I'm not an expert on the United States, but my observation about Donald Trump is that he is a transactional president. I was very fascinated when Mr. Mamdani, the mayor of New York, went into the White House and talked about a genocide. It's the first time this has ever happened in front of the president, and the president didn't resile from that, didn't say, no, it's not happening. He's in changing the nature of public discourse, very a positive thing. To go on to the Arab countries. Now, one of the major problems Palestinians have had for decades now is the Arab countries have not been on their side. And really, they have they haven't been a big force speaking out for Palestinians really since the 1980s. And maybe Donald Trump is slightly changing that because he is happy. It's quite obvious to listen to pressure from Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, Qatar too.
Right. You predict, Mr. Oborne, that ministers, as you said in your book, could face genocide charges. But Tony Blair helped destroy Iraq and nothing happened. No trials, no jail time, not even a slap on the wrist after Chilcot report, for example. In fact, he was rewarded. If British law has never punished the architects of these wars, isn't legal accountability just a comforting fantasy? Why would Gaza be the exception when Iraq, Afghanistan, and the rest never were?
I think you're making a very powerful point here. That was an illegal war, and the ultimate war crime, a crime of aggression. And I think there was a legal case against Mr. Blair, not just him, others around him, because they set out on the illegal invasion of Iraq on the false grounds, weapons of mass destruction. There should have been legal charges, and I think if they'd done that, Britain would be a different country today, and we wouldn't have allowed ourselves to be dragged into on America's coattails into being complicit with the carnage which Israel has inflicted on Gaza. But I think we may have learnt the lessons from that. I think there must be accountability. The impunity which British leaders enjoy when they embark on illegal adventures like Iraq is a terrible thing.
Peter, so today Trump is applying the exact template to Venezuela: extrajudicial assassinations, unilateral violation of sovereignty, media and international institutions manufacturing consent, bipartisan silence, and resources and oil as the admitted purpose and goal. If the world couldn't stop this logic in Palestine after 77 years of documentation, what makes anyone think it can stop it in Venezuela?
I don't know enough about Venezuela, but I do feel that these foreign adventures go wrong. We learnt that in Iraq, we learnt it in Libya, we learnt it in Afghanistan. Donald Trump came into office saying that he was a domestic prime minister. He was interested in giving up the foreign adventurism. These are words I'm putting into his mouth, but I think that was his general argument about. I really don't understand why America wants to engage itself in the affairs of Venezuela, particularly when it's so critical of other countries like Russia when they start to invade their neighbors.
Right, Peter Oborne, British journalist, author, and a trailblazer. Thank you for this absolutely brilliant talk and for this also important book. Always a pleasure to have you, Peter.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to come on your. Thank you very much indeed. I hope to see you again soon.
Most welcome. بيتر أوبون أثبت كل ما قاربه. المسؤولون البريطانيون تآمروا في إبادة جماعية في غزة قانونيا بدقة وبالإيصالات والوثائق. الإعلام البريطاني زور بشكل منهجي بالتنسيق مع الحكومة. الديمقراطية البريطانية مهيكلة لتجاهل المواطنين في القضايا الإمبريالية. القانون الدولي غير قابل للتطبيق ضد من يصوغونه. أوبون وثق آلة تعمل بشكل مثالي. ليست ديمقراطية معطلة تحتاج إلى إصلاح، ليست إعلام فاسدا يحتاج إلى مساءلة، نظام يعمل تماما كما صمم، تمكين الإمبراطورية بغض النظر عن إرادة الشعب، مئات الآلاف الذين تظاهروا أسبوعيا. لكن الخط السياسي لم يتزحزح. أوبون يتوقع حسابا قادما ومساءلة قانونية. السؤال يبقى: ما الذي يحول التوثيق إلى تحرير؟ وما الذي يجعل غزة مختلفة؟ من كل الميادين حياكم.